Hello and welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo. Our main focus for today is the state of politics in Nigeria and how that impacts the polity. We're joined by lawyer, scholar, poet, rights activist and public affairs commentator, Dr. Ugaga Ifowodo, and he will be speaking to emerging issues on the current state of play and politics in Nigeria. Next, we discuss local government administration structure and systemic challenges impeding progress and development at that level with Professor Fred Eze, Professor of Public Administration and the Director of Studies, Enugu State University of Technology Business School there in Enugu.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of agreements in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
With the next election cycle already casting a long shadow, questions about governance, opposition viability, and the very fabric of our federation has been paramount. They've been out there, but requiring answers now more than, ever before. To help us unpack some of these complex issues, we're joined by lawyer, scholar, poet, rights activist, and public affairs commentator, Dr. Ugaga Ifowodo. Doc, too many titles, I don't know, but I mean, what it means to me is that you're suitably qualified for this conversation. I'd like to welcome you to Insights. I know we've been chasing after you for a while to have you here on the program. So I feel quite delighted to have you on the program this day. Thank you so much for coming in.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Good to have you. Doc, I'd like for you to begin by appraising the rather rising public perception on the current state or current issue of politics over policy, or maybe it's better described as politics over governance. This is against the shadow of the 2027 national elections. And yes, I know there are ongoing conversations in the public domain on how the economy has moved from point A to point B, on how we're boosting infrastructure across the federation and agriculture and all the achievements that have been made. Yet, it does seem, even at this point, like the 2027 elections dominate all else. So the prevailing perception is that governance is being held captive by, early maneuverings for the 2027 presidential election, hence the preponderance of premature campaigns, which in itself, and Doc, you would agree with me, INEC just a couple of weeks back talked about that as a challenge, as a problem. Let me take advantage of your expertise in law and political analysis and ask you a direct question. Do you consider all of these issues, absolutely normal, to have, such level of high-level maneuvering 2 years before even the first vote is cast in 2027? Or are we seeing the definitive triumph of politics over policy?
I think it's normal. If we are dealing within the liberal democratic system of governments, which has periodic elections, especially periodic elections that have a 4-year cycle. 4 years might seem to be a long time, but it's a very short time, actually. And there's always politics. It's always a matter of more or less. And the intensity of it depends on what specific issue is at stake at the moment. So if, for instance, the issue is elections are coming up, and candidates are already campaigning in the primaries, parties are already trying to choose their flag bearers, that becomes the particular slant on the politics of the day. At other intervals, it will be a question of one government policy or the other. And because the opposition is looking to exploit every possible weakness, every possible loophole, and even when there is none, make it look as if there is, to their own advantage, and it's no fault of theirs. That's what opposition parties do. It always seems to look as if politics is dominating the scene and crowding out every other thing. But the truth is, policy and politics are interrelated. Governance and politics are one and the same thing in that sense. So we always have to pay attention to the specific issue. So maybe as we go along, when we get to specific issues,
I wanted us to deal with this issue completely so we can move on to other issues. In fact, you already made allusions to the quality of opposition, and so I will be talking about that. But let me take you back to the same issue of, premature campaigns, and, you said it's normal. Well, a lot of people might agree with you on that stance. Those on the other side might say, no, it's not. There are laws. We do actually have laws, and these laws are specific, even though some persons have said that, look, there are loopholes and lacunas in our existing laws, and that's where all of that. What do you define as premature campaigns, for instance? Can you say a government in power cannot tout or laud some achievements it's made? And of course, you talked about opposition, also, criticizing just about anything the government in power, or the ruling party, does. So what then, do you then say it's normal, even in the presence of existing laws?
Well, it's a fine line. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's a fine line, because every act of a government in power can be interpreted to mean a campaign, and every act of the opposition party can also be interpreted to mean a campaign. One is trying to show that the other is not doing a good job, and therefore we are in a better position, to govern better.
Okay.
That's one. The other one say we're already doing a good job in the light of the circumstances, the problems, the encumbrances that we encountered, and this are what we're doing. So it's a question of perspective at that point. That's why I say we have to look at specific issues. Have electoral politics begun in the sense of active campaigning? If INEC, for instance, as we are speaking now, the voter re-registration exercise is going on, and parties are mobilizing to have more people registered into their parties, is that campaigning? And if so, does that not affect all the political parties who must necessarily be involved in the act of mobilizing, recruiting new members into their parties, and ensuring that those who are already members, who for any reason may have problems with identification, whatever the problem might be, change of address, they've relocated, they want to change their voting unit, all of that is part of politics. Yes. So again, it's the specific issue at stake that we can zero in on and see what the current government's position is on it and what the opposition is saying. And then we can say, is this some kind of unwholesome campaigning, or is this just the opposition doing what opposition does to cast everything that the government in power does in a negative light?
Great. So it's quite a delicate line, like you've said, and it will take some careful treading to walk the line. In terms of a government in power, Doc, I'd like for you to also speak to that. How delicately balanced, or how delicate is it for a ruling party in power to also walk this line, this fine line that you've talked about between balancing governance and politics, especially as the elections approach?
It's delicate only to the extent that it knows that every of its steps is going to be scrutinized by the opposition. So it has to be mindful of the fact of its actions being misread and cast in a light different from what is intended, and probably also different from what it is achieving on the ground. But at the same time, a government that is too mindful of that can easily, cripple itself. The only thing it has to be sure of is what it wants to do. Is this in the interest of the people? Is this part of what we campaigned on as a mandate, what we want to do? And therefore, we have a mandate to do it. And are they sincere? If they are not being deliberately misleading, self-serving, then I think they should worry very little about how the opposition is going to see it, because the opposition will necessarily see it in a different light than that in which it conceived it. Maybe just to bring it home.
Yes.
Take the removal of fuel subsidy. which has led, and also not just the removal of fuel subsidy, or the closing of the foreign exchange markets in order to stop artificially propping up the value of the naira, defending it against the foreign currencies, even at the risk, their risk of our economy, of the central bank printing money to do so under the so-called Ways and Means Committee. So now, all the major political parties, at least the three major political parties in the last general election, their candidates said they were committed to removing the subsidies, fuel subsidies, and restoring the value of the naira. So now, taking subsidy alone, the current government removed it and removed all the distortions that came along with it, some of which we are beginning to see now as Dangote keeps crying out about the so-called cabal that is insistent on holding the petroleum sector, to ransom, Nigerians to ransom. So the question to ask is, if the opposition is critical of the current government, and say because that policy has brought hardship, has led to a sharp decline in the value of the naira, and therefore there's hunger in the land as food items and necessities have gone out of the reach of the ordinary Nigerian. The question would be, though, what would the opposition have done differently? Is the opposition therefore saying that if they were in power, they would have kept the subsidies, or that if they are voted into power, they will restore the subsidies? And if they will restore the subsidies, how do they hope to find the monies to keep government running, first of all, and then two, to prop up the value of the naira?
And when you lay all of these out, Doc, and earlier on you talked about the opposition, and I felt, okay, Doc is talking about the opposition in an idyllic sense, what should be ideally. So let's talk about the quality of opposition in Nigeria, and and this presumptive, one-party shift that is much talked about everywhere. It will seem right now, and a lot of people have said that the opposition currently in Nigeria is in disarray. Most of the bigger parties, the dominant, well, let me say the bigger parties, and even the smaller ones, are seemingly engaged right now in internal wranglings, which they also accuse the ruling APC of sponsoring. This development has spawned what appears to be the opposition's inability to present a coherent alternative, like not the kind of alternative that the scenario that you've just painted. So, Doc, are we seeing, or rather, I know, yes, we are seeing movements, we see people move from one party to another, defections, realignment, what we call political cross-carpeting. It's even more dominant now than ever before. My question to you, Doc, with the APC controlling the federal parastatus and most states, as it would seem right now, are we witnessing the organic, if not alarming, emergence of a de facto one-party state indeed? Or does the failure of the opposition lie in their own structural weaknesses? Is there some conscious strategy by the APC to co-opt, perhaps even lure and entice bigwigs from other parties into its own fold before the 2027 elections? Is that what we're seeing play out, in the polity right now?
I think you partially touched on what the real problem is. The opposition trying to blame its weaknesses on the party in power. We've had this talk about one party, or the drift to one party state. It didn't even start with APC. APC was not even in existence. At the time, PDP was boasting of being the largest party in Africa, and that it would be in governance for 60 years.
60 or 70? 60, I think.
Well, we can take 60 as a baseline.
Yes.
We can take 60 as a baseline. So at the time they were boasting of that, APC was not even in existence. Again, this crying wolf, it's bothersome. I would like our opposition parties, because no democracy can thrive without a viable opposition. Yes. I've always held fast to that. And I've always given the instance of a parliamentary system, which I still advocate for Nigeria, being cheaper, less expensive to run, and having numerous advantages, in my view, more than the parliamentary system in a multi-ethnic society like ours. But that's a different subject for another day. But there's no danger, in my view, of Nigeria drifting into a one-party dictatorship. First reason is because Nigeria is too big and complex. The various ethnic groups, the various social groups, cultural, religious groups, and their interests are clashing almost all the time, mostly because of the interests of the elites that dominate them, not necessarily because of the ordinary people, actually, cannot coexist with each other. But being that as it may, the idea that one day, at least in the foreseeable future, as things are right now, Nigeria will drift into a one-party state, I think is far-fetched. It's just politicians scaremongering and trying to blame their weaknesses on the party in power. After all, it is the elite, it is the leaders of this party who have been in every political party. The case of Atiku Abubakar, for instance, is the most famous. It's been literally all the parties since 1999. So who is going to be the one causing this drift into a one-party state when they are the ones who never stayed true to their parties?
To what extent does the party in power, the ruling party, share in the responsibility of fostering a viable opposition in a democracy?
It is not the it's not in the interest, and it shouldn't be the primary task of the party in power to do things to create opposition for itself or to strengthen opposition against itself. It isn't. It is the business of the opposition
to what extent does it allow opposition to try to, Yes.
Of course, well, the laws are there. For instance, if the government in power is clamping down on opposition, preventing them from exercising a constitutional right to freedom of association, because we may, no matter how we see political parties enjoying a larger than life, almost like a natural status, they are actually associations that are formed by people of like minds. They are no different in essence in the right that enables them to come together as from the right that enables all students to come together and form an all students association or a market, tomato sellers association. So it's freedom of association. That's what enables political parties to come together. They say, we believe that this is the way we can run our country for the better interest of everybody and vote for us because of that reason. So they come together to work towards that goal. So if the government in power is preventing freedom of association, peaceable assembly, and then the freedom of expression, because all of these are intertwined, freedom of movement, then we can hold the government responsible. We can at that point, they can even go to court to challenge that. But to just glibly say the government in power is taking our members from us, who's taking them? I mean, they have the right to stay or not to stay. And they've been exercising that right again since 1999, moving from one party to the other, and then they will come back again to the same parties and go leave it again, go to another one. So I think it is just crying wolf.
There's also the issue of no clearly defined ideology, amongst our parties or, between the parties, so that it makes jumping from one party to another easy in Nigeria. Our parties are not ideologically based. And so there are no clear distinctions between, say, PDP's stands on education, for instance, and APC's stand opposition on education, for instance. Our ideologies or party political ideologies do not vary from issues to issues as far as politics is concerned in Nigeria. Is that also part of the challenge here, Doc?
I don't think that's as much a problem as the fact of individual selfish interest. Because when you read their platforms, they actually wax very often quite lyrical on the good things that we want. If you look at the fundamental principle and directive principle of state part of the Constitution and look at their platforms, you can say, oh, this is beautiful. It is really the selfish interest. Take the classic example. After all, we supposedly model our democracy after the United States, presidential system, which I think we have copied, word for word, literally, quote and unquote, to our own detriment, But there was a time, many people would say there is no difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. In fact, I remember some time back when Obama and Hillary we're on the cusp of becoming
Look,
the
I would think they are clearly defined. Take immigration, for instance.
Oh no, but let me land.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, when you scrutinize and go beyond the policies of the day-by-day policies of government, one president or the other, basically there are platforms. There's really nothing that is anti-liberal democracy.
True.
So for instance, you cannot say the Democratic Party is a Democratic Socialist Party or a Marxist party. No, they are all still rooted in the liberal democratic system of governance.
True.
So the differences in policies like immigration are a matter of more or less. In fact, Joe Biden is reputed to have actually deported more as quote unquote illegal aliens than even Trump in his first tenure. So we have to be careful to really scrutinize these policies and then know that at the end of the day, it's not because there's lack of ideological difference, but the interest, that will to power, that desire to be the ones governing, to be the ones in power, not to be left out of the political, power structure, so that you are far from the divvying up of the resources of the land, the access to political power, influence, appointments, and so on. That is what drives them more than any ideological commitment to Nigeria.
Doc, let me quickly move you on to Rivers State. I mean, that's yet another topical issue. The political situation in that state appears to have de-escalated, but some persons still criticize the process, describing the current state of affairs, as a piece of the graveyard. I'm not saying that's the piece that comes before I'm just saying what people are saying. But they say the process that led to where we are right now in Rivers State is a fragile elite-backed truce that bypassed the people entirely. In your opinion, what specific measurable targets do you think the people of Rivers State should, at this point, demand from the Fubara administration to ensure that this peace, this peace that we're talking about translates into tangible democratic dividends and not just the quiet consolidation of a new political machine?
I may be simplistic about it,
Please.
But to me, it is between Fubara and Wike. That's where the crisis started. That's where it will end. I read recently that Wike says the problem has ended. He and Fubara are back, to being on the same page. I hope it remains so. And if it remains so, peace will return. The people at the grassroots always take the cue from their leaders because they owe allegiance to them. So if the leaders are saying we want peace, we bury the hatchet, well, then I think there will be peace. Let me just leave it at that as a way of picking at the basic minimum.
Fantastic. So now I'm moving on to yet another germane issue, the question on Nigeria's democratic evolution and how certain socio-economic development continue to test our resilience as a democracy. Today, we're contending with issues like, secessionist agitations in the southeast, insecurity across the country, and the troubling cost of living crisis that we have. Even now, I hear people asking the question whether, as a country and as a people, we're nearing a breaking point. Doc, time and again, history teaches us that, a nation is perpetually a work in progress. Ours is a work in progress. Most democracies are. But based on your critical observations of some of the things you've seen, is this current phase that we are a predictable, albeit painful, part of our democratic evolution towards a more united democracy? Do things have to get really bad before it eventually begins to get better? When do we turn the curve?
If you follow history, then you have to say yes, that things have to get bad before they get better. Because who was the philosopher that said, I don't know if it's Benjamin Franklin, scholar, intellectual, that said every civilization is a document of barbarism, No, not what Benjamin Franklin. Walter Benjamin, I meant to say, I beg your pardon. That every civilization is a document of barbarism. When you look at it, pare away all the shine that you see today, all the rights that we take for granted today, and then look at how those rights were achieved, then you realize that so much struggle, so much blood, so much suffering had passed before we got there. Now, do we necessarily have to repeat the past? Can't we learn from the mistakes of the past and have a less painful way to what we want? That is the question to be answered. But as long as we have the problems here and we know the causes, the question will be, can we tackle them honestly and sincerely without the country falling apart first? My answer is that we can.
Okay.
My answer is that the fact that Nigeria has even stayed together for as long as it has, when it was thrown right into a crisis of being one or divided just 6 years after independence, means that we are past the biggest test, and no test that is going to come our way now is going to undo us unless we ourselves willingly want it to undo us. But I think the easiest way to also avoid a lot of those problems is to hit the call that the opposition, the genuine left in Nigeria, has been making for a long time, which is, after colonialism, Nigeria by now ought to have sat down to decide for itself a proper, true, genuine and representative constitution of the people, made by the people. So we agree that this is what we want our country to be. These will be the relations between the constituent parts, but not to just, kind of lackadaisically think that things are going to be all right. Why haven't we had a sovereign national conference until now? As much as people might criticize President Bola Ahmed Tinubu today, he's the one actually who's done a few things.
It seems as though, Doc, you're not satisfied with the amendments that have been made to the Constitution. Are you saying you'd rather prefer a complete overhaul of the entire Constitution?
No, in fact, that's where I was going, that there are two ways. Either we have a complete overhaul, have a brand new Constitution for all, which is my preferred way. Okay. It's preferred for any nation. What can be better than, after every constitution starts by we the people, right? So what better way to say it is we the people than to actually bring the elected, freely and democratically elected representatives of the people together to then decide on what we want. But if that is proving too difficult for any number of socio-political reasons now, what can we do in the alternative? And this is where I'm going to praise President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, because at least two of the things he's done so far. First one, autonomy to the local governments. It's one of the things that ought to have been done long ago. People might quarrel or quibble about how he did it, whether the judicial going to court over it to do it was the best way, whether the court gave the right decision. But what we know is that the goal has always been autonomy for the local governments. He achieved that. Secondly, the exclusive legislative list and some of the items on it, including power generation. Power is one of the biggest problems that Nigeria has. To centralize power in a country that can hardly generate enough electricity to even turn on the lights in homes, let alone manufacturing and industry, to now take it from the exclusive legislative list and allow states to generate their power. It's already beginning to nibble from the corners, if you like, are those things that we would do at a sovereign national conference to give true meaning to self-determination, true governance, and empowering the federating units more than the center. So if before the end of his tenure he does even a little more of this, we will be inching our way closer. But if you ask me, the preference is let the people come together in a conclave, in a conference, and decide a new constitution for themselves.
Doc, I hear you and I hear you clearly. Unfortunately, we're out of time. There are a lot more issues I wanted us to take up on. I wanted us to talk about the resilience of the youth of Nigeria and how they could, using the social media, of course, transform Nigeria's political landscape. And of course, there's also the issue of the 2027 elections. Yes, the elections are not here. We've not even cast the first vote, but now we see what is in play. But I guess we'll have to take that up next time when you come on the program. For now, we'll just draw the curtain here, and I'd like to thank you so much, lawyer, scholar, poet, right activist, and public affairs analyst, Dr. Ogaga Ifowodo. Thank you so much for your thoughts on all of the issues that we've laid out, quite germane, quite profound. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Hope we'll see you back here on Insight sometime real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'll be back whenever you want me.
Now let's delve into a critical tier of Nigeria's governance. Governance structure, as it were, the local government, often described as the government closest to the people. Its potential for driving grassroots development has been persistently hampered by systemic challenges. In essence, what we see is, experts describe a situation that experts describe as a grassroots development paradox, where despite huge allocations to the local government from the federation account, and in spite of a Supreme Court judgment to bolster that fact, what we see mostly is that tangible evidence of development remain elusive in many communities. Let me bring in my guest. My next guest is Professor Fred Eze, Professor of Public Administration. He's also the director, Enugu State University of Technology Business School there in Enugu. That's ESUT Business School in Enugu. Prof, it's good to see you. Prof here would help us unpack, some of these issues that I've talked about. He joins us via Zoom from the coal city, Enugu, Southeast Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on Insight, Prof. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Prof, I am sure you understand this issue typically and why this paradox of underdevelopment has persisted. This paradox that I've talked about earlier or referenced earlier. Despite immense prospects and potential for growth, over time, we've talked about where the failure primarily lies. But what I want you to do instead is to go positive and begin by first speaking to the importance, the imperatives, and the viability of a viral local government administrative system in Nigeria. Prof, how germane is that to actualizing grassroots development across the country?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am very grateful to the NTA and to you for this opportunity to talk about the local government system, especially in Nigeria, as it pertains to Nigeria. You see, let me start by saying that if there had not been any local government system by now, it would have been necessary to invent it, because you cannot run a democracy like ours without the local government system. Let me say it again, say in other words, that the local government system is irreplaceable in a democracy, and it's unsubstitutable in a democracy. And one of the greatest problems we're having is that we're trying to replace the local government system. We're trying to substitute the local government system, a very local government system. And then we cannot go anywhere. Let me start. You see, most of the problems that bedeviled the Nigerian society as it is now, 60 to 70% of it can be handled with a very local government system. You can solve these problems with a very local government system in Nigeria. I can give you some examples.
No matter how deep-rooted the issues are?
Just listen to me. And let me have it. It may not be that it will annihilate all the problems. It's not possible in a modern society. But you can ameliorate this society. You can reduce it to manageable size.
I get that.
Security. Now. Let's take the one that is on the front burner right now. Security. Insecurity in Nigeria. People do not realize that a greater percentage of the security problems can be handled by local government system. People do not remember that we had local government police in Nigeria. We had local government police, native authority police in Nigeria. And when we centralized the policing system in Nigeria, and then with the ramification and the complex growth of the Nigerian society, a centralized police system can no longer cope. Our problem has gone beyond even state police. What is needed is local government police. Why? Because if you recruit local government police from the rural areas, from the communities making up that local government, train them very well, equip them very well, they know the nooks and crannies of that society. They know the nooks and crannies of the community. In the rural community, everybody knows everybody else. They know when a bandit comes in, they know when an intruder comes in. But if you get somebody from a completely different society, a part of Nigeria, and ask him to be the policeman in the creeks in River State and Bayelsa State, and then the rogue jumps into the creek, and you think he's going to follow him? He doesn't know. To a certain extent, he will not pursue that chief. But the truth of the matter is that if you had gotten somebody from the local environment, give him adequate training, equip him, there will be no room for all these large-scale insecurity that we have in Nigeria today. In the United States of America and other large democracies, policing is local. They have the FBI, which is the federal.
Which is federal, of course.
They have the state troopers, which is the state structure. They have the municipal police.
True.
New York City Department, Los Angeles City Department, Police Department. The budget for New York City Police Department for this year is $5.7 billion. $5.7 billion. Just New York City. It's different from New York State troopers. In other modern democracies, even large institutions have their own police, like universities. What stops University of Lagos from having the University of Lagos Police Department, University of Ibadan Police Department, FCT Police Department, different from Federal Police Department? They will be able to control criminality within that environment. And that's what we are not getting. And when I was so happy when the president, His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, came on aid the other time and said, look, is it time for state police? I praise him for that. He's one person who has been a federalist to the core.
So, Prof, if I may come in here, Prof, just as we can use this local government approach to tackle an issue like insecurity or security, as it were, so we can also do in other areas, like whether it's agriculture, whether it's education, whether it's, just about any development sector.
I'm coming. Can you, if you give me some time, let me go through them.
Yes, because Prof, the truth is that there are a whole lot of issues that you and I need to talk about, and I would like for you to just
let me be brief about it.
Please.
I grew up in a town. It came in this local government, which was a local government headquarters. The agri department in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s was virile. You know what they did? They received new seedlings, varieties from research institutes, from everywhere, and they multiplied these seeds, and they had agric extension workers that went to the rural villages and said, plant this seed, plant this seed. This one is a new variety. It can withstand drought. It can withstand weevils. But now, all those things are gone. You can solve the food problem in Nigeria with a very local government system. They'll be able to identify the real farmers. So if you want to distribute inputs, there are the people who will identify the real farmers, not from the center. Primary health care.
Yes.
I can tell you, 60% of the health needs of the rural person can be met by a good health center managed by the local government, not states. It's only referral cases that you have to go to tertiary or secondary health care
institutions.
Most of the primary health care agencies in the rural area are already decimated, and that's the problem we are having.
So, Prof, it is. I have a very strong suspicion that you do not agree with the current model of how allocations come down to the local government via the states. And yes, granted, Prof, I know we have a lot to contend with structurally and constitutionally in order for us to have this model of local government that you've talked about, autonomous, in Nigeria. But, even today, we know that a good portion, a significant portion of federal funding meant for grassroots development is channeled through constituency projects, legislators' constituency projects. Again, some would say bypassing local government councils. Do you believe this model is effective, this federal via states to local government in terms of funding? Or do you think it further weakens local administrations and blurs the line of accountability for, especially for project delivery at the grassroots?
I said the local government system was too replaceable. But we are trying to replace the local government system by other means. You create consultancy project, you plan for it from the center, from the federal, and you expect the federal ministry to implement consultancy project in the rural communities. The only governmental structure, the level, the tier that has the specialized tentacles to penetrate down the grassroots is the local government system. And if you try to bypass it, the federal government has no mechanism of reaching all the 774 local governments, 8,806 wards in Nigeria. It's not designed to be so. The only level tier that is designed to reach the grassroots is the local government system. But the constituency projects are implemented outside any connection with the local government system.
If you were to rejig the system and rejig the format, how would you rather go?
Simple. It's not rocket science. This has been being done all over the world, all the large democracies. Federal funding to municipalities and local authorities are packaged and tied to projects and sent, and you cannot use it for any other thing. It's tied with string, and inspectors come to inspect whether you have carried out that. Okay, like in US, normally what they do is they send federal grants to municipalities. It could be for refuse disposal, it could be for housing, it could be for education. And they tell you this money is coming, you are going to use it to build 10 classrooms in these communities, in these rural areas, or to improve school enrollment, or to improve teachers' welfare. It is tied. And inspectors come to make sure that you implement. If you don't implement it, you do not get another tranche. It's when you have implemented that grant, what the grant was supposed to be used for, then other tranches of the grant will come. That
so
is how
if you're dissatisfied, Prof, if you're dissatisfied with the format of constituency projects as currently exists, I am very sure you're also dissatisfied with the oversight and monitoring being done by the legislators themselves. Even if they describe themselves as the people's voice, they are the people's representative there in the center. They are from the grassroots there. So doesn't that suffice for something? Doesn't that say something at least in terms of accountability and supervision of some of these projects at the grassroots?
Well, oversight function is a constitutional provision that the right of the legislators. Nobody will dispute that. It's the right that they have to oversee the execution of the budget. But basically, they are federal legislators or state legislators in the capital cities, not in the rural areas where these projects are going to be executed. We need somebody on the ground, not somebody who is visiting.
Like councillors?
Yeah, yes. Why the council not supervising the project in his ward? Why is it not part of the structure or mechanism to implement those constituency projects. That's just where we don't agree with the system as it is now. There
Okay.
has to be a mechanism of involving the local government structure in the implementation of constituency projects. And when we begin to see good results going forward.
Yes, Prof. I mean, as a professor of public administration, there's an issue I'd like to take up with you. And just, I mean, in sustaining this line of conversation on transparency and accountability, you know, more expansively now in the public sector at all levels, you know, whether it's the federal, state, or local government. These days, we see and hear of situations where those with the responsibilities of implementing some of these policies and programs, like you have mentioned, you know, are the same ones flaunting them. Prof, isn't it true that no politician can succeed at anything without collaboration with the civil servants or with the public sector worker or officer, whether it is with the Procurement Act or indeed any other statutory guideline? What then is the practical imperatives for leadership in the public sector, including at local government level?
Well, thank you very much for this question. It's been one of the major problems we are grappling with in the public sector in the third world, not just in Nigeria. There is this disconnect between what is supposed to be done and what is happening on the ground. We had a national conference last week, and I posed this question to the participants. I said, why do we have permanent secretary? What is the meaning of permanent secretary? What is the philosophical underpinning of the term permanent secretary? You see, the permanent secretary represents the permanent interest of the society. The minister can come and go. The commissioner can come and go. The local government chairman can come and go. But the permanent secretary remains. And he ensures that in the operation of that ministry or that government agency, ministry or department or agency, he preserves the permanent interest of the society and ensures that every bit of accountability is preserved. And that is why he or she must sign every check before any expenditure is made in the ministry. But unfortunately, that's not what we are seeing today. We are seeing situations where the permanent secretary or the director or whoever is in charge colludes with the political class to loot government resources. That is not, it is an aberration. And that does not mean that the bureaucratic model that we are using to manage the ministries is wrong. It's not. It is orientation.
Okay.
The problem is not with the rule. It's not with the regulation. The problem is with the operators of the system.
How do we now merge all of these, the orientation, attitudinal change, work ethics? How do we merge all of that to boost productivity in the public sector, you know, for peak performance? You know, take for instance, Prof, the quality of personnel there in the local government service, you know, for instance. How can we, if you go to most local governments, Prof, you and I know, they don't go to work.
Yeah.
And these are the same persons you want implementing those same constituency projects that you're talking about. These are the same persons you're saying we should have police supervising local government police. So if we are to get it right, how do we professionalize, you know, this local government workforce to ensure that public servants are not just skilled, not only skilled, but they are ethically compelled to act in the interest of their communities? And that's your that will be your final word, Prof.
Please. Look, this is very important. Your question is very important. And that means we need fundamental changes. Leadership recruitment process in the local government system is very important. And that is where we are getting it wrong. Now, because of the apron strings which we have tied the local government to the governments, and the state governors can pick whomever is going to be the chairman and councillor. And what does that mean? Now, it means that it is no longer performance that determines the electability of the local government official. It is his acceptance to the state government. That is what. So he's no longer responsible to the people. He's not responsible to the state government. And that is a sacred pillar of democracy. We have demolished a sacred pillar of democracy in the local government system. That is the accountability the local government official has to render to the people. That we remove that, and that has demolished everything we are doing. So the local government official, whether he does right or he does wrong, the people do not have the right to vote him out. And every other thing follows from there. That is where the rot starts. So it's every man to himself. And that is the problem. So we must get it right. To get it right, we must remove 197 of 1999 Constitution that grants the establishment of state independent electoral commission. We must make the INEC, the federal INEC, conduct local government elections throughout the federation and insist that elections will be credible, fair, and free. Once we do that, we restore that confidence. Part of the problem of Nigerian democracy is that we have mismanaged the local government democracy. The local government system is the incubator. That's the breeding ground for democratic practices. You get it wrong at the local government system, it is not easy for you to correct it at the state or federal, because at the local government elections, it is their kids and kin that conduct this election. They know who should be there, and they will be interested to come out to vote if they know that their votes will count. But what we have done is we have removed the ordinary citizen from choosing he or she wants to be his official at the local government level. And so there is general idea that it will not count. And so there's a correct vote in local election, they likely not vote election.
Prof, if you can hear me, we're having issues with your network. Unfortunately, we started great, but now it's failing us. But incidentally, we're out of time. My director just told me we're totally out of time. But of course, this is an ongoing conversation. We will try and bring you back so we can. There's a whole lot more to talk about. In how, yes, despite or in spite of the Supreme Court's judgment, we cannot say we have in practice, autonomous local governments, across the federation. You and I will engage in this conversation in the near future. We will be bringing you back presently to talk about that and a whole lot more. But for now, I'd like to thank you so much, Professor Fred Eze, Professor of Public Administration and Director, Enugu State University of Technology, Technology Business School, Enugu. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, I'd like to apologize to our viewer for the intermittent break, in connection there. It's due to poor connectivity. It's from Prof's side, not from our side. Prof's network
I'm on
is
Starlink. I am surprised that you're having this. I'm on Starlink.
Oh my God!
Thank
Wow.
you.
Well, but we'll see. I'm pretty sure our next conversation will go a whole lot better. Please feel free to come into our studio or to let us know whenever you're in town in Abuja, so we can just bring you into the studio so we can have a studio-based conversation as well. But for now, I'd like to thank you so much for your input. I thank you for your thoughts on these issues. They're quite profound, I must say, I dare say. Thank you so much, Prof, for coming on Insight.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, viewers.
And that's it on Insight for this week. Join us same time next week for more on the program. My name is Nnamdi Odipo. I'll see you again next week. Bye for now.